something Treasurer Wolfinger gets to do every 5 years, so I don't want to steal your thunder. Mr. Wolfinger.
Thank you, Chairman Stoughton. It is a great honor that once every 5 years I get to have a piece of legislation.
Get to speak. We're happy to have you, too.
Yeah.
We know he doesn't like to speak.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, per the High Revised Code, and there's certain references in there, that we have to advertise to our local financial institutions and give them the opportunity to submit an application, and which is essentially what you're seeing in front of us, an application to have the opportunity to have our money on deposit at those financial institutions. And really, we're not necessarily approving financial institutions as far as their quality and their soundness and safetiness. That's already covered in the High Revised Code, that they have to meet all that criteria in any event. Probably the thing that it might scare you or shock you is the dollar amounts associated with these bids, and that's probably your main question. It's interesting that I've got 3 or 4 bids come in, and I forget the phrase they used, but it was essentially unlimited. And they can only take deposits up to 30% of their capital and all that type of thing. And you, of course, you take the PNCs of the world and the Huntingtons, those are huge numbers, and they want to have an unlimited number. Well, I didn't agree with that necessarily. I don't like unlimited numbers, but on the same token, the way I read the code, and I shared it with Randall, we did not get in, I didn't ask for an opinion. I said, no, I want a stated dollar amount. So rather than putting $4 billion down, they came back with 150 million, 50 million, things of that nature. We don't have that kind of money to invest. I wish we did. And so that's why that number is kind of out of kilter. So basically, once this legislation is passed, and then we'll enter into a written agreement signed by both parties and agreeing to they can do this, and that, and that's pretty much where we are.
Only a banker could talk almost as long as a lawyer. So that was good.
Well, we had 2 pages of legislation. I needed to get through both pages.
Are there any questions for Mr. Wolfinger Treasurer Wolfinger on this piece? 3 readings, sir?
We can do 3 readings, whatever you wish.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We will go 3 readings on 11021, and Mrs. Kreitz, if you will second.
And I get to speak next meeting too?
Sure. If you let, I'll give you the floor for the next 3 meetings. How about that?
Thank you. No, I don't want it. Thank you.
Bob. Moving on, the next item I have is Resolution 11221. That's a resolution authorizing the mayor to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission SKIP program and execute contracts. This is for a project, capital improvement projects from South High Street, or that includes South High Street and Perry Street. So, Mayor Scheffler, do you want to speak to that, or is that something that the city engineer is going to speak about?
Well, this is the annual program of grants through the Ohio Public Works Commission. We have applications every year, and we always have to approve what we submit. And between engineer Nolan and stormwater director Denise Cruz, we have at least 1 or 2 projects every year. I don't recall exactly what these projects are, but they're just normal run-of-the-mill type things that we seek reimbursement for.
Great. I know we had one last meeting as well. So, Mitch, you got an idea of what the dollar value is? Engineer's estimate?
Yeah, so there's usually a sweet spot that we try to go for, and that's usually try to get a grant for around $500,000. So it's about a $700,000 total project. We're going to do that 74-26 split like we try to do to get points. So that's the plan for this.
All right, and this would be slotted when if we got funded?
This would be a project next year that we would try to complete next year.
Okay. Yep. Any questions for Mr. Nolan or the mayor? Our timing on this looks like 2 readings, right?
Yeah, that works.
Very good. Thank you. We'll get 2 readings on 1/12/21, although I'm not sure why I stole that from you, Corey. That was your piece, not mine. Sorry about that.
You're good. It sounded great.
And your second?
Mr. James.
Mr. James. All right, perfect. 2 readings on 1/12/21. Next item I have is Resolution 113/21. That's a resolution to appropriate from the general fund, 1,001 for police and fire hiring. Service Safety Director Martin, do you want to tell us why?
Yes, this is finance resolution to cover, so just,
It is,
you're
thank
safe
you.
on that one there. But, we actually just, this is an oversight on my part to not put it into the mid-year budget adjustment we did last time. We did put some money.
You knew I was going to ask you that.
Yep, and disappointing that I had to come back here and get you, but I've got some pending bills, and we did up it for a sergeant's exam, but with the hiring that's been going on, by the way, we just sworn another fireman today. We are on a good path for firemen. Police is just a little bit slower, and justly so. But this cost here is physical, medical, drug, but it also covers some other testing that we do for the safety forces.
Any questions for Service Safety Director Martin on this? What's always nice to see on those Facebook posts when we're actually hiring people and getting people into the fold in both police and fire. So I appreciate you guys putting those up there. So it shows we're kind of making a little bit of progress. So with no further questions, we will ask for suspension tonight. Melody, would you second that, please?
I will.
Awesome. So we'll go suspension on Resolution 113/21. Next item I have is Ordinance 33/21. That is the non-union pay ordinance. And it looks like by the language that we are now going to include community development in the pro-pay portion of the pay ordinance. I think that's the only change. Makes sense to me. Full-time employees, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So not sure why. Well, they were all part-time, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just been there for a long time, and so with this change, we just failed to recognize that when we introduced it.
Yeah, this might be the most modified pay ordinance in
I
a
think so.
in a year that we've ever had. So we're going to have to ask for suspension to get this in place, so the next pay period, we can pick it up. And for those, it's $25 biweekly for an associate degree and $40 biweekly for a bachelor's degree. So it is a good stipend for people that have their degree. So we will ask for suspension on this. Mrs. Bobbitt again.
Yes.
Will you second that? All right, so we will suspend on 33/21. Are there any departmental updates this evening?
Just point of information here, in the packet is resolution 111/21, or it's not on your agenda? Or you're getting to it later?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
You still under that surgical
I'm under what?
anesthetic?
He had a lot of pain this afternoon.
Good. Yeah, well, been there, done that, so, all right. Thank you.
So I do have a departmental update.
Sure.
Just to let you know that today, just to give you an update on with transit specifically, Jason Moyer, who is now our transit director, has started employment today. He previously was the general manager for Ride Right when we had a third-party administrating that. But we've been able to get him back. He has still been in transit, a lot of great experience, highly recommended by Carrie, but Gretchen and I also interviewed him with Carrie before she started her new job here with United Way. So I'm really grateful that we were able to get him. It's a good plus for us. Also let you know that I moved Michelle McCready in my office over to be the assistant director. She brings a good knowledge with the city government, and she's actually started that last Tuesday to replace the assistant director for transit over there. So that's quite a step for her, and I think they'll make a good team as we move forward with that. Also, maybe I've already told you this, but Darren Drum, he is now our water department superintendent. Mike Nixon is officially back over distant water pollution control, as you know. That is a major project going over on Lawrence Street right now. $20+ million project. Is going to be 1 to 2 years for that, so he can be completely devoted to that project. And that's an important thing. So Darren has been meeting with several people, myself, Gretchen, and Mike Nixon will be a great resource for him on some things. But a tall task for him. That gives us an opening for a plant manager, so I'm looking to try to fill that position. Don't know how that will work out yet. We had somebody turn us down today that we made an offer to. But we have had a lot of moving pieces here recently, just to let you know, from my perspective and Gretchen's perspective. We've got a lot of things going on, just other positions, as we move forward to try to keep putting the best people we can possibly in all the positions, not just what's required. You know, that's a high priority for us. But I think good hiring really brings a lot of success to any organization, any department. So just, that's my update.
Very good, thank you. Any questions for the Service Safety Director? Very good, thank you. Further departmental updates? Looks like the city engineer is.
I'll give a few updates. So you've seen some progress, or if you drive by the Edie Road project, you see activity on both sides of North Columbus Street. You see partial parts of Edie Road paved up to kind of the southern entrance to Hugh White Chevrolet. The thing we're working on right now is the strain poles for the signals. That is kind of becoming our critical path at this point, just because if you look near it'd be the corner where the old State Highway Patrol is, there's cabinets and existing strain poles that are in the way. Well, we got to get the new ones in place before we can take down the old parts, and we're anticipating strain poles and things like that being delivered mid-October. Well, that doesn't leave a lot of time to finish up paving if you have to get all that work done. So we're trying to push to get that work done as quickly as possible so we can get this thing buttoned up. But that's what we're kind of fighting on right now. So the Timber Top subdivision, which is just up the street, there was some lane widening and lane closures we had there just recently last week, and I think they're actually finished up and it's looking good and kind of getting cleaned up. I think there are actually some sidewalks being put in right now. So Sheridan Drive, you'll see some activity up along Sheridan Drive with the Safe Routes to School project that's coming along. And Kokosing, who is the 6th Avenue Award winner for that project from Memorial down to Roosevelt, they have been struggling to get concrete crews here. Everyone is busy. Everyone is backed up. We're trying to play contractor matchmaker because Newcomer Concrete is here in town, and trying to get them maybe hooked up with Kokosing that they could help out and maybe be a subcontractor to Kokosing. But right now the concrete work is lagging. They were supposed to start the 8th. They delayed till the 13th, which is today. And now they're saying next Monday is their first start date. So we're trying to get that project started. So
Very good question. Yes, Mr. Matt.
Sheridan Drive, sidewalks, some of them yards are pretty tall compared to where the sidewalk's going to be. Are they going to get some sort of retaining wall or something?
we do have retaining wall planned in certain areas. And there may be some that might look a little bit, where there'll be a little bit of slope back, but there are walls planned in certain ones, yes.
Yeah, we driven by, a couple of them are chopped off there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. James.
This is not so much a question as it is a comment. I'm staying real close to what's happening on Timber Top, and I have received 0 phone calls on any traffic issues from any of the constituents out there. Every time I drive by, the traffic control has been superb. It's been well done, well directed, and once again, job well done.
Thank you.
I
Yep.
wouldn't spike the football on the traffic issues out
Yeah.
there.
I just caught it.
Yeah, okay.
I'm only to 50 yards.
Yeah, you got some yardage. So, but no, to date though, you're good. You're in the first quarter. All right. Further departmental updates. Anything else?
That's it.
Thanks, Mitch. Further updates. Not many of you left out there. All right, so now I'm going to defer to President McDaniel for tonight's meeting prep.
We have one item, temporary resolution 11121. It's a resolution to apply for grant funding from HUD for the fiscal year 21 Healthy Homes Production Program coming out economic development. Mr. Stoughton.
Oh, thank you, Mr. McDaniel. So I think Linda is here to brief us on this.
Yes.
So I will defer to Linda.
Good evening. So this is a grant program through HUD. It's a companion grant program for the lead hazard control grant that we received last year. The minimum is $1 million for the request, so that's what we intend to request. And where the lead hazard control grant can only be used for households with children under 6, this grant, and that is primarily for lead hazard control, lead paint abatement. This program can be used for households with children of any age, for older adults, 62 and over, and for people with disabilities. So it really expands our ability to serve more households, more constituents, and for additional housing health hazards. So for example, mold, extreme heat, extreme cold, pests, just gives us more funding, which is really useful to serve more people, and then for a wider variety, to abate a wider variety of home health hazards. And the application is due September 21st, so one reading would be appreciated so that we can submit it on time.
Certainly. Questions for Linda? Yes, Mrs. Bobbitt?
Since we have the viewing public, can you explain to the viewing public how they can make how they can get a grant like this?
Yes, make application to our office. We can go to our website. We have our number, our phone number, our email addresses on our website. Please call us, email us, come into the office. You can fill out an application right in our office. We could email it to you. You can fill it out and send it in, email it in.
And this is 100% grant for removal of lead-based paint from your home.
Right.
Thank you.
And other home health hazards.
Right. On this one, you said mold.
Right. It could be
pest.
falling hazards.
Okay.
Of course, this is funding that we're just applying for.
Right.
So we'll have to report back if we hopefully will be awarded, and then we can make those grant dollars available. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, well, in the essence of time, we're going to ask for suspension with Mrs. Kreitz as the second. Okay.
Suspension with Mrs. Kreitz as the second. Back to you.
Any other items for finance? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn. Second.
We are adjourned. It is 6:17. Oh, very good.
City council meeting will start promptly at 6:30 p.m.
See what happens.
Events and all around town. We consider our clients as friends, and we walk alongside you through challenging times. Whether you're a growing business, a changing family, facing litigation, planning your future, or dealing with land issues, we're right here. We are local. We are trusted. We are experienced. Dagger Law.
There is no place like Lancaster, Ohio, and Fairfield County, and like you, I am proud to call them home. As a longtime resident of Lancaster and graduate of Lancaster High School, this community is important to me, and I want to provide superior customer service, professionalism, integrity, and honesty at the Connor Insurance Agency. I am committed to supporting local programs and projects through my volunteer work and board membership with several organizations. It has been a great honor to work with all the first responders throughout Lancaster, Fairfield County, and the state of Ohio to put on Kids and Cops Day, to be a part of Shop with a Cop alongside the Lancaster Police Department and JFS. and to help Lancaster Public Education Foundation raise funds to support our local public schools and teachers. These men and women work hard to protect and support our community, and I would like to take this moment to say thank you for all they do. My goal as a business owner and insurance agent is to provide my clients with the most appropriate services and coverage for their needs at a competitive rate. As an independent agent, I have several carriers to choose from so I can customize your insurance coverage to fit your needs and desires. I strive to make sure there are no gaps in your coverage that could be harmful, and just as important, that you are not overinsured. I look forward to serving your insurance needs now and in the future. At Connor Insurance, we are here to serve you by protecting what is important to you. Please contact my office at 740-654-2848 for a full list of services and carriers, or visit my website, ConnorInsuranceAgency.com.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
That was a little wimpy, but, good evening. Welcome to Lancaster City Council. Please join me in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, please be with this council. Please help us try to conduct ourselves and the business of the city with the most moral and ethical possible way. We ask for serenity, courage, and wisdom. In your name we pray. Amen. Call the meeting to order. Please join me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt? Here. Mrs. Kreitz? Here. Mr. Hall?
Here.
Mr. James? Here. Mr. Matlin?
Here.
Mr. McDaniel?
Here.
Mr. Schoonover?
Here.
Mr. Stoughton?
Here.
And Mrs. Tino? Here.
I'd like to make a motion that we excuse Council President David Ohl.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to excuse President Wolf from tonight's meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Reading and disposal of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated August 23rd, 2021.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Reports from city officials.
Email dated September 3rd, 2021 regarding the sidewalk repair reimbursement program update submitted by City Engineer Mitch Nolan. Series of emails regarding code enforcement and zoning agenda submitted by Mr. Matlin. And finally, an email dated September 13th, 2021 regarding the finance agenda submitted by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive the reports of city officials. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Any communications?
There is one, a letter of notification dated August 26, 2021 regarding Sifford Station project submitted by Maggie Beggs, Project Outreach Specialist from AEP.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communications.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive and file communications. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any special presentations? No, we do not. Petitions or memorials?
There are none to be presented.
At this time, we set aside time to allow voters and taxpayers of the city to address council on any item or issue they would like. If you are interested in addressing Lancaster City Council, please come to the podium, sign in with your name and address. Please use the green clipboard to do that. And then state your name and address for the record also. Please note that members of the council will not respond to you during this time, but may choose to do so at a later time during the meeting. In accordance with the rules of council, we ask you to limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Is there anyone who would like to address Lancaster City Council at this time? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Much appreciated. Reports of standing committees.
Finance Committee meeting dated September 13th, 2021, submitted by Mr. Stoughton, and the Water Pollution Control meeting dated August the 11th, 2021, submitted by Mr. James.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of standing committees. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Reports of special committees.
There are none to be presented.
Tonight, we do have a public hearing. We have a public hearing on temporary ordinance 29-21. Let me take a moment to outline the rules and procedures for our public hearing. I will first ask that the clerk read the preamble of the ordinance that we are considering. Afterwards, as the sponsor of the legislation, I'll make some opening remarks. Once I have provided a few comments for the opening, we will open the floor to allow comments from those in attendance. I will first ask for proponents to come forward. If you are in favor of this particular piece of legislation, you can come forward and sign in on the silver clipboard. State your name and address for the record. You will then be able to proceed with your comments. After the proponents speak, the opponents, those that oppose the legislation, will be given an opportunity to speak. Once we make it through the first round, we will then bring the proponents back up for any rebuttal. Please note that if you speak, you must speak in the first round to speak in the second round. So therefore, if you choose to speak at any time tonight, you must speak in the first round to be allowed to come back and either rebut or comment a second time. After that is done, we will turn it back over to the sponsor, myself, for closing comments. And before we close the public hearing, we will allow for any final thoughts. Are there any proponents who would like to speak in favor of this legislation? Oh, I'm sorry, we need to read the preamble. Got ahead of myself. Thank you.
An ordinance amending the zoning map subject to passage of the annexation of the 25.8723 plus minus acres in Hocking Township and to declaring an emergency, offered by Mr. McDaniel.
Okay, we will open this public meeting. I just want to take a quick second to address the reason we're here. We're here regarding, as I stated earlier, Ordinance 2921 involving zoning for a piece of legislation that is set, or at least we're anticipating annexation from Hocking Township. The City Planning Commission took action on this on August 12th, 2021 and approved the zoning change request. This was also in front of the city's Board of Zoning Appeals earlier and was also approved by them for recommended approval. At this point, it's council's turn to have a public hearing and address any issues we may have regarding any zoning on this parcel. So at this time, I would ask that any proponents would like to speak on this legislation come forward, and then please state your name and address for the record, but also list your name and on the silver clipboard, please.
Good evening. Members of council, Melody, our ward representative. My name is Laura Comack. I'm here this evening on behalf of Loves and Mary Reedy for purposes of changing the zoning map. My address is 17 South High Street, 700 Suite, Columbus, Ohio, 43215. As the proponent for this zoning change, you've already outlined a few of the steps that we have taken following council's adoption of the pre-annexation agreement that included the outline of the steps that we'd be taking through the development process. We have obtained the approval of the BZA for minor variances associated with islands and some trees. Happy to discuss any of those points. The bottom line on that is parking lot islands don't work great with trucks. So what we try to do is eliminate those and then redistribute trees throughout the site. Also for some signage tweaks associated with the development and having that freeway frontage. We also appeared before the Planning Commission to review the CH district and its applicability to this area generally located along the bypass, which is a future growth area for the city. Also, since we met, we had held our annexation hearing, and that has been approved by the Fairfield County Commissioners. We are currently in that transition period for the transmittal of the record. When that happens, and Randall will tell you, there's going to be a 60-day wait period, so we'll come back to you in November for the final action. So today, we're going to talk about the zoning and any questions that you have, and then the final wrap-up will all come together, hopefully in a well-coordinated, kind of parallel track associated with these applications. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the project. The city has spent $30 million over the course of time extending sewer and water lines out to this area, onto the west side of town, and to Ms. Bonnett's ward. That area is seeing growth and development, and we think that the change of use for all of the area that's being annexed, only part of it's being purchased by Loves, is an appropriate land use given its proximity to the freeway and the city's plans for future growth. One other thing before I take any questions, Chad Bruner with Loves is here. Chad was unable to make our meeting due to his flight being canceled and all the strangeness in the world. So Chad's here this evening on behalf of Loves to answer any additional questions that you have about the business or what we've got planned there.
Please state your name. The clerk didn't catch the last name.
Mine, sorry.
Yes, please.
Yeah, sorry. My name is Chad Bruner. I'm with Love's Travel Stops Country Stores, 10601 North Pennsylvania, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73120. Laura covered it really well. We think we're a good use for out there. We think we'll help drive more development in that area, which I think is what the city's looking for in their industrial development. And we appreciate your consideration of the matter. Thank you.
Any members of council have questions for the proponents that are speaking? Seeing none, any other proponents that would like to speak on behalf of this legislation? Any other proponents for this legislation? Hearing none, I would invite any opponents, people who are opposed to this piece of legislation, to come forward to the podium to address council. If you do so, sign in on the silver clipboard, and we'll be happy to hear from you. Any opponents to 2921, please come forward. Seeing none, if our proponents have any closing comments they would like to make, please do so.
No, sir. Appreciate the consideration this evening. Thank you. And thank you for the time help, because we're a little bit ahead of schedule, which was super helpful for council last time to expedite our annexation, pre-annexation agreement.
Thank you much. Appreciate that. Since no opponents spoke initially, no opportunity for anyone else to speak, I will conclude this with some remarks. I believe a lot was said at the podium that echoes my feeling. This is an opportunity for us as a city to move in a direction that I believe that the future of Lancaster is headed that way. Annexing this property, these zoning changes, in my opinion, seem reasonable. They seem consistent with what would have to happen to allow a truck stop to be there. So my personal opinion is I'm in favor of this particular piece of legislation, and that will conclude the public hearing at this time. Thank you. We'll return to the regular order of business here with the reading of resolutions. With the first resolution, 103-21.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for engineering services for evaluation of the South Water Plant, including the concentrate line rehabilitation project, and to approve all then and now certificates that may come from this project. Offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Hall.
Mr. James.
Thank you, Mr. President. Basically, we've talked about this in some of the previous meetings, specifically about the concentrate line that has some pluggage to it. We desperately need to be able to clean that and actually improve the capacity of the South Water Plant. There's also some other things that we'd like to look at trying to change on that. And, Mr. President, at this time, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution number 103-21.
Second. We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of resolution 103-21. Discussion, Mr. James?
Nothing further, thank you.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 8-0. Oh, I'm sorry, 9-0, yes. My apologies. -1, but not one voting member. Mr. James.
Thank you again, Mr. President. Now I would like to make a motion that council pass and grossly enter upon our written record temporary resolution number 103-21.
Second. We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 103-21. Mr. James,
Nothing further on that, thank you.
please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Resolution to pass passes 9-0. 104-21.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement Program and to execute contracts as required, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James?
This is the second of 3 readings. Thank you.
Thank you. Second of 3 readings on 104-21. 105-21.
A resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Fairfield County Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor, offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Bobbitt.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the second of 3 readings, please.
Second of 3 readings on 105-21. 107-21.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor in the general fund 1001, offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Bobbitt.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of Resolution Temporary 107-21, please.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to waive the rules, to suspend rules and waive the third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 107-21. Mr. Stoughton, any further discussion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to ask for suspension so we can get this money appropriated and get this program started. I'll speak a little more to it on the next motion.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Resolution Temporary 107-21, please.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 107-21. Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I think one of the things that the mayor had talked about when we proposed an income tax increase to our residents was to, get in to infrastructure repairs, one of them being the sidewalk repair reimbursement program, which the city engineer and the city administration have worked on. This will fund that program to the tune of $100,000 from the general fund to really start this program and kind of see where it goes. We've talked about sidewalks a lot in my last 18 years in this chair. This was the first concrete thing I think we've done. So, and we got to thank the residents. I mean, if we don't have that funding, we're not going to have $100,000 to spend on that in 2021. So I'm excited about this, and hence my reason for suspending and getting it on the books.
Any further discussion on passing the ordinance or resolution? I'm sorry. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to pass 9-0. 108-21.
A resolution to adopt a sidewalk repair reimbursement program for the city of Lancaster, offered by Mr. Matlin and seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. Matlin.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 108-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 108-21. Mr. Matlin.
Yeah, again, this is what Mr. Stoughton talked about, the resolution for the money. This is the actual resolution for the program. We'd like to get it passed so we can maybe get it started and spend some of that money this year while the construction season is still upon us.
Further discussion on motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Matlin.
Mr. Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 10821.
Second.
We have a motion as a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 108-21. Discussion, Mr. Manning.
I think we talked about it quite a bit last meeting. We had the engineer up, and I received no comment or phone calls from any taxpayers. I don't know if anybody else did, but I think it's going to be a good thing to get started. So.
Any other discussion on motion to pass? Just please
Add
call the
a
roll.
couple comments.
Oh, I'm
just-
sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yes.
I was
Please.
just going to add some comments that I've had a lot of phone calls and a lot of people who are planning to sign up. I haven't put the forms out on the internet yet, nor have we made them available at the front desk. I was waiting until this moment came, but from what I can understand, there's going to be some people showing up tomorrow morning filling out applications. So I've had probably 15 or 20 people call, and they're lined up and ready to start this program. So
That's a good thing.
Very good, thank you. Any other discussion on the motion to pass?
Just one other comment, and it kind of mirrors what the mayor said the other day. You know, this is moving the city to more of a walkable city. All of us around here have, you know, taken walks, seen the sidewalks that are torn up. Mothers pushing their baby carriages have to go over into the grass. I'm pushing around little grandkids now, and I see these sidewalks. So this is our first step. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Any other comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to pass, passes 9-0. 109-21.
I'm sorry, 110, 111 passed the last
Oh, I'm
meeting.
sorry.
That's my fault.
Okay, it's on the agenda, I guess.
A resolution, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we'll move to first readings now.
Yes.
110-21.
A resolution accepting the applications of financial institutions and designating depositories of public funds offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This will be the first of three readings on this piece, please.
First of three readings on 110-21. 111-21.
A resolution authorizing the Community Development Department to apply for grant funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Development's HUD FY 2021 Healthy Homes Production Program, offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of Resolution Temporary 11121, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 11121. Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We have an opportunity to apply for this grant funding for the lead abatement, I believe. The grant is due on September the 21st, therefore we need to pass this evening because we don't need to get until the 27th. Hence my reason for asking for suspension.
Any further discussion on motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record Resolution Temporary 11121, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 111-21. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
I have nothing further.
Any discussion on motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 111-21 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 112-21.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement and/or Local Transportation Improvement Program or programs, and to execute contracts as required. Offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
This be the first of 2 readings, please.
First of 2 readings on 112-21, temporary resolution 113-21.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the general fund 1001 to amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor. Offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Bobbitt.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion the council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporary 113-21, please.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 113-21. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We're asking for suspension tonight because we need the funding for the pre-employment testing, civil service testing due to hiring additional positions within police and fire. This was an account that was missed in our mid-year budget correction, so we are asking for suspension to get it funded tonight, please.
Further discussion on motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass and engross and enter upon the written record resolution temporary 113-21, please.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 113-21. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
Nothing further?
Any discussion on motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 113-21 passes 9-0. We will now move to the reading of ordinances. We have a second reading on ordinance 26-21.
An ordinance to authorize the mayor to enter into an agreement to accept approximately 0.076 acres more or less of real property identified as parcel number 053-202-7400 from Fairfield County Land Bank Reutilization Corporation, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. Schoonover.
This is the second of 3 readings.
Second of 3 readings on temporary ordinance 26-21, temporary ordinance 27-21.
An ordinance to accept a petition for annexation of 25.8723 plus minus acres in Hocking Township and to declare an emergency, offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
This is also the second of 3 readings. Temporary ordinance 28-21.
An ordinance to repeal and replace Lancaster Codified Ordinance Part 11, Planning and Zoning Code, Title I, Subdivision Regulations, Chapter 1105, Section 1105.03, Submittal of Minor Subdivision Lot Splits, C through H, and Chapter 1109, Section 1109.06, Streets, D, Dedication of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Lancaster, offered by Mr. Matlin, seconded by Mr. Hall.
Mr. Matlin.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 28-21.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 28-21. Discussion, Mr. Matlin.
This ordinance cleans up some language for what's the engineer's department calls minor subdivisions, which really do lot splits and then put in less than 5 separate lots, and it makes it possible that we can require sidewalks on those and also require the dedication of some right-of-ways to the city, which we didn't have that ability before. I want to get it moving so we can implement the rules with any possible upcoming applications.
Any other discussion on the motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Matlin.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 2821.
Second. We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 28-21. Mr. Matlin.
Nothing further.
Any discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 28-21 passes 9-0. 29-21.
An ordinance amending the zoning map subject to passage of the annexation of the 25.8723 plus minus acres in Hocking Township and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
This is the second of three readings on 29-21. 31-21.
An ordinance to accept easements necessary to construct, install, repair, maintain, rebuild, replace, relocate, operate, inspect, and/or remove city sanitary sewer and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Hall.
Mr. James.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the second, 3 readings.
Second of three readings on 31-21. 32-21.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of notes in the maximum principal amount of $900,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of renovation of an existing building for the use of the city's municipal court, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the second of three readings, please.
Second of three readings on 32-21. We will now have first reading on temporary ordinance 33-21.
An ordinance to amend ordinance 25-21, repeal and replace existing 25-21, and declare an emergency for the non-union pay ordinance. Offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Bobbit.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of ordinance temporary 3321, please.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 3321. Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We are amending this ordinance. We hadn't caught in the pro-pay area, which is section 5. Pro-pay did not apply to community development because they were all part-time employees. And then it also said or part-time employees, and now they are not all part-time employees, but they are now included in the pro-pay portion of the ordinance. So that is the change that we're making tonight.
Any further discussion on motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporary 3321, please.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 33-21. Mr. Stoughton.
Nothing further.
Any other discussion on motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbit?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 33-21 passes 9-0. We have no action on our table of legislation. It'll have to remain on the table until after the election. Do we have any unfinished business? Do we have any new business? I will ask clerk to read the announcement of our scheduled meetings.
The next regular scheduled council meeting is September 27th. The meeting following is October the 11th. Both meetings at 6:30 PM here in council chambers. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. And I'll mention ahead of time, all of the meetings with except of finance is in the City Hall 1897 room. Economic Developments, September 16th at 7:30 AM. Finance, September 27th at 6 PM. Service, October 1st at 7:30 a.m. Public Works, October 8th at 7:30 a.m. Finance, October the 11th at 6 p.m. And Water Pollution Control, October 13th at 8 a.m.
Thank you. Do we have any bills?
There are two. Spotlight Trophies and Awards, $12 for a nameplate, and PNC for our publication in the MNCO paper for $114.40 for publication of legislation.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to pay the bills.
And I second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to pay the bills. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Do we have a need for an executive session? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, I would like to make that motion to adjourn.
And I second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned.
Sign your legislation, please.